Peter Dunbar, and I was the Director of Parks, Rec and Culture for 30 years in the lovely town of Collingwood. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to sit down with my colleagues and my friends and discuss the history of development of arts and culture in Collingwood. Now, to start things off a little bit, I was a lucky person as a young man, and I got a hockey scholarship to go to University of Michigan. So as I returned from that adventure in America, I landed up in small little communities trying to develop a second career. Obviously, hockey was going to be my main stay. I was an arena manager in a small little town in Drayton, Ontario, which, by the way, has a theater there today. I then moved to Wasaga Beach for 5 years, and I was the Director of Recreation. And it was just looking after the arena and programs, the baseball diamonds, the tennis courts, those sorts of things. And 5 years later, there was an opportunity to go to Collingwood. And lo and behold, it was advertised as Parks, Recreation and Culture. And that's the first time that I had that aspect of possible areas of responsibility for me. So I thought that it would be great, especially for my position today. Currently, over the last 8 years, I've been working in Georgian College, and what I'm trying to do is bring students up to level to what challenges and responsibilities and options are available in that sort of career. And more and more and more, these three words keep on coming up throughout Ontario: arts, culture, and heritage. And so last year I was asked to put together a course that actually would supplement the current course at Georgian with these new areas of concern. So and yes, that's probably a little slow in the uptake, and maybe they should have done that a few years ago, but it was at least a starting mode to now train new recreationists in some of the arts and options involved with arts, culture, and heritage. So it was a great development. So I'm very pleased to have you here today to help me sort of undust the past and look at things that occurred as all four of us were engaged in moving Collingwood from a position basically in an industrial sector community. In the 50s, there was 4 or 5 large corporations that were assisted by the provincial government to come to Collingwood and provide a more stable environment for the shipbuilding industry that had been here for 150 years, but there was some unstableness to it. One of the great things in my life is I saw the last ship launched in Collingwood, which was like seeing an apartment building moving down the side of, and I had my mouth open the whole time. I just couldn't believe that was possible. People said this is what would happen.
This is the way you build them, and that's the way they go.
And it was a very rare way of building them. This place and one in Scotland were the only 2 places in the world that side launched. Everybody else ran them out into the bay, and it was fine, but Collingwood wanted to be a little different. So I'd love for each one of you to introduce yourselves and give me a little slice of what I know, but share with the audience. Why would I have this collection of experts around the table? How did we all get together originally?
Okay, well, my name's Penny Skelton, and I guess you could sort of say I'm the arts and culture volunteer in the community. I'll hold on to my volunteer status as the mainstay. When Peter came to town in the early 80s?
Yes.
Trying to think. I was on the board of directors of what was known as the Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts. And by the time we had our own activities, the thing that was interesting about Collingwood was we had a theater group. We had a lot of arts and culture type groups providing programming, providing classes, providing input to the community independently, and definitely independently of the municipality. So our organization had visual arts, performing arts, which put on a concert series and brought some plays to town. We did programming for the youth through the Board of Education. We had visual arts. We ran a juried show each year. We did different things, but all 100% manned by volunteers. So when I became the chair of the foundation and we looked at doing different things, we sort of said there's an office over in the town hall that has a brass plaque on the door at the end of the hall. It says Parks, Recreation and Culture. And we all said, what does that culture mean on the door and to the department? So I walked over and knocked on the door and sat down and had my first conversation with you and said, okay, so what does culture mean to you and what's the municipality doing about it? And I think that was the beginning not only of an association with my association, other groups began to see you needed the tie to the municipality. That was the link that was sort of like a missing link. Everybody was autonomous. The organizations did their own little thing, but we had no relationship to the municipality. So, and a very nice friendship, I might add, this lasted
Absolutely.
through all these years till now. So with the foundation, we found a way, and when I came off when I retired as the past chair, Peter said, you really should put your name in. We have a Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee, and we would like to designate one seat for a cultural person. Take that C and make it someone. So I put my name into the municipality. Now I was volunteering directly to the municipality, and that's when we started to sort of pedal our little bike and say, what does culture mean to the municipality?
And do you remember there was some pushback in the community when I was hired because my portfolio before was I was a hockey player. So it just happened that Collingwood had a very competitive hockey team, and so
true.
I was a desirable asset to also come to the town. So there was some, all we got was a jock, and I had to stand and defend myself, and rightly so.
And I remember what your famous line, I like to paint. I like culture too, I like art too. But I think the other thing was in getting involved, the organizations developed in the community because they didn't develop through the municipal structure, and beginning to see the crossover was interesting because there was a place within the municipality, and it's grown. Once you get in the door, it grows. But you have to get in the door. That's where advisory committees are wonderful things, because that was a very active group. But other than, there was sort of a Hatfield and a McCoy's prior to getting involved with the municipality, because the arts and culture groups were over here. And then, as you say, the jocks were over here. So Collingwood was known, the culture of Collingwood was hockey, baseball, hardball, slow pitch, and latterly developing was soccer. So we had a lot of sports going on, but never the twain shall meet. They were sort of two groups. Now they've almost all come together in a more forward-looking, incorporating way of doing things. So once I got involved with the advisory board, it became things like, what do you do? We try to get a line in the municipal budget, but we also tried to develop a municipal cultural plan. And that's what led me over to the ministry, because we found not only resources, but money. And that's what led me to meet Kathy Campbell, who's across the sofa from me.
We've all seemed to come in collision with each other in a series of ways and means, but all been very positive because, again, you are my colleagues and my friends, and this is 30 years later. So tell us your story. How did you get introduced to Collingwood, and how did you take on what you still have is a very active role in this community?
Thanks, Peter. My husband and I moved to Collingwood almost 30 years ago. I worked for the province of Ontario, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. The ministry has changed names over the course of years, but it was generally the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Recreation, or Culture and Recreation. The mandates of the department that you worked with and the government ministry that I worked for, as well as my colleague Greg, matched very closely. Shortly after I moved to town with my job, I was approached to become part of a volunteer group that was working on the municipal cultural plan that Penny has just referenced. As a new resident in Collingwood, I was thrilled because I saw it as an opportunity of getting involved, getting to know people, and being able to contribute the knowledge and expertise that I had about cultural planning and about cultural development in municipalities. Part of my job was to be a consultant in the communities where I worked on the development of municipal culture and recreation. So it was a community development job that encouraged people to get involved, to volunteer, and encouraged municipalities and other organizations to work together. And in addition to that, part of my job was to manage grant programs. So those two things could come together from time to time, where you would see the opportunity of a project developing in a community, and you would be able to recommend funding to assist that project to get going. Generally speaking, these were project grants, and what that means is that the grant is dedicated to a one-time purpose, and generally speaking, it's a matching grant for the specific project rather than ongoing operating support. In the particular case where I got involved, I recall that there may have been a grant, but at the same time, there was the opportunity for getting involved as a volunteer. And the project was to advise on the development of what became the first municipal cultural policy. And attendant recommendations as to planning for how to take the policy forward with municipal leadership over the subsequent years. That's how I came to be involved in the first place in Collingwood.
I found it incredibly energizing that I could talk to people like you who could give me other examples happening in other communities, and it didn't seem like I was the only one suffering and not moving forward fast enough. And I don't know if you remember, but I used to be a hound on the grants. If I could find a grant, I'd almost ask once a month, is there anything new coming up? Is there any grant? If anything that can do to help us move forward, I would chase those grants down very, very, with a great nose to trying to get success and money. Because that really was the shortfall for me at that point in time, is I had no money. There was no line in the budget that said cultural support, cultural programming, or those sorts of things. And so to spend $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 of money that was going to go someplace else, it was hard to wrestle that money away from the sports organizations that needed a new seed or a new goalpost or a new set of lights or something else. So I often had a wrestling match trying to find money, and my introduction to you was very supportive to find out little bits and pieces that helped Penny and the committee move forward in that chase of developing culture.
I think you've missed one important point, Peter.
Probably.
You were our first director of Parks, Rec, and Culture. Prior to that, we had Donnie Rich and Brian Boyce in a pickup truck. That's what I used to say was the Parks and Rec department.
And a couple of shovels.
And a couple of shovels, that's
True,
right.
true.
So you were the first management level with a degree and an interest in coordinating even everything that the town currently did, let alone expanding it.
Yes.
So you were finding your way as well as we were trying to find a way in.
And building on that,
Yeah.
I think it's a really important point that, especially for the audience, Parks, Recreation, and Culture has become very much a professional practice in municipalities. So you were able to bring forward research and current knowledge about professional practice that moved the municipality forward hugely from what it had been prior to your arrival. And then also coming back to the notion of grants, especially the kind of grants that my colleague Greg and I were able to administer and bring with us in our toolkit to municipalities and other community organizations, is this, that the prospect of a grant can usually be a lever. You can use that prospect of a grant to leverage out other support for projects. There may be moral support, there may be some money in place to get a project underway, but if there's the prospect of a grant, then the municipality that may have been reluctant may say, okay, well, we'll put up our $25,000 if we can get 25 or 50 from other places, and suddenly we have a $75,000 project that was way out of our scope before that.
Yes.
So grants in themselves are, yes, of course you seek them and are always on the hunt for opportunities to do the work that you want to get done. But from the, I think it's important to also observe for your audience that grants are also of equal interest to the funder, because the funder has an agenda as well, wants to see good practice and excellent work getting done, and those grants can be the tool that gets the funder through the door to deliver on their agenda, which matches up with the local municipality or other community organization's agenda. It's a really great matchmaking process when that happens well.
Brilliant point. And I believe in those early days, it was 33 and a third, 33 and a third, 33 and a third. So if I could take the possibility of getting $50,000 from the government, it necessitated me to find sponsorship or in-kind services or whatever, and then all of a sudden I could put together a $150,000 project for repairs to the pool or whatever. And this all made great sense, and the community actually supported it because they were getting something from the government. So
Yes.
there was great support. And it was a great way of delivering that service to the community, because all the government, the citizens, and the municipality all had to hold hands and agree on an exact description of the project and do it. And yes,
A wonderful sense of investment in advancing the cause, whatever the cause of the project might have been. All the partners are together in investing in the success of that endeavor.
I think of a funny story back in those days, and it was from the rural communities. When you folks got to the rural communities, some of the politicians would say, "Where's your briefcase? And is there any checks in your briefcase?" You're the Winterio people. So Winterio was
We're
that.
so old, we remember Winterio.
It was the very first recreational funding device and tool that Ontario has had, and there was a great surge of recreation repairs and facilities done, I believe in 75 to 85, in that sort of era. So today, we've not seen the likes of it again for a couple of reasons. One is all that money that was raised through Ontario and Fay Dance. They used to travel
yes.
around the communities,
Do their
and you
draws.
would host. You would host them to do the draw in your community. So your community got a provincial profile. It got a great opportunity to show off their community, and that money was going back into recreation.
In addition to that, in addition to the infrastructure investments, I think it's also important to point out that this was the impetus for a great deal of planning that may not have happened very professionally or very much in the past.
I think planning
Infrastructure
prior to that was
might-
an annual budget,
Yeah,
Yes.
or
where you took
infrastructure
your
would
best
be
guess of
left
what you were doing. Yeah.
not invested in until it was almost derelict. But then too, you could begin to do community planning. What's the growth of the community going to be? What are the needs going to be in the future? What do people actually want to see in this community? What's the quality of life that we want to see in this community? And then be able to develop a vision of what you want that to be in the future, invest in a planning process that will get you there, and then your annual budgets can be tied in with seeing out that vision over the coming years for the period of the plan. That hadn't really happened in my experience before there were grants in place that would partner up various levels of government in investing in long-term planning as well as infrastructure development.
Well,
Yes,
the
and-
relationship between municipalities and the province has changed quite dramatically over the years. Municipalities were basically set up as managers of land by the province, because we
True.
can't do it, you guys do it, and consequently, municipal philosophy was based on the fact that if it doesn't have anything to do with the land, it doesn't have anything to do with the citizenry. So what you got was municipalities basically concerned about roads, sewers, public works.
Yeah.
Over the time, I guess beginning in the 1920s, which really was the first grant program that came out of the province for something beyond the construction of a road, was the Community Halls Act, which basically said if you build a community hall, we'll give you $5,000. And that was the start of it, 1925. So since then, I think the sport and recreation sector, because basically leisure and culture wasn't even a word used back in the 20s and 30s in the municipal sense, but leisure and sport and recreation was used because everybody in the community, you came off the farm at the end of the day, you went out to the ball game at night, or your son played, or you played or you went to the community hall. It was a tangible aspect within a municipality.
And that was the culture of
that
the
didn't
communities.
exist. That was the culture of the community.
Yeah.
Arts and the economics behind arts really didn't take hold probably to the 70s and 70s, but it was a natural transition. The sport and recreation sector came first in saying, you know, we need another arena, we need another ball diamond, because that was easy, that was tangible. When you started to get into the cultural aspect
And
of
it was
the
a
community.
beginning and an end. You build it, you play hockey in it, you play baseball in it. The municipality is in charge of the upkeep.
Yeah, and you fix
and
it.
the staffing,
and when it's
and
broken,
you fix it.
Culture is something
It's a
that
sponge.
it's sort of a sponge, but it's inherent in all of us.
Yeah.
And it's inherent in every individual in the community. And it's inherent, and what had happened is the transition from an individual being involved in painting or performing or writing translated into groups being formed and larger groups being formed, and then the networking between those groups. And then the last element in the whole cultural perspective, I think, and it's still going on, is the economic development of arts and culture in a community. And that's what started to kind of turn the head of the local politician that didn't understand what arts and culture was, because you still get some small communities that think that arts and culture is something that exists in Toronto, and it's
Not for us.
No, it's a social class level association with it, but it's not, because your kids are taking art classes,
Yep.
your wife is performing in the local theater, and guess what you're doing? You're a stagehand.
Yep.
So when they start to see it that way, it starts to change a little bit. So, and also I think the provincial municipal role is basically, as provincial employees, Kathy and I, a lot of our role was involved in what was called community development and organizational development. And in simple terms, community development is basically organizing the unorganized, and organization development is
That's
basically
a great definition.
fixing an organization when it needs fixing.
Yeah.
So our job was to go into a community, assist in the creation of an organization to carry out something, and our organizational development role was to keep that organization running, to continue to do the good work that it's doing. Some of those were sport organizations, but a lot of them were arts and cultural organizations, and that was basically part of our role. So we're virtually, in Simcoe County, for instance, when I started here in 1980, there were two arts organizations, basically. One was Penny's Blue
Yep.
Mountain Foundation,
Yep.
and then we had the Purple Hearts Arts and Heritage Society out of Creemore.
Creemore. Yeah.
The
And
hills.
that's it. Now, when I left the job about 6-7 years ago, there were 6 arts councils, plus representing over 250 cultural and arts organizations across the county. And I only mention the county because I was responsible for that piece of geography of which Collingwood was part.
So do you think that the reason that sports groups got together a little quicker and a little more attention was because they were already organized? They already had large bodies, and
They had
there were
teams, they had
representatives,
leagues.
and there was a large mass. And so from a political point of view, everybody knew who the local team was playing against whoever, and it was male dominated, no question about it. But I'm wondering, what do you think, what was the impetus for organization and getting that original structure going? Like, where did it grow from? Because out in Western Canada, they've developed a lot of cultural mapping initiatives. And just the physical collection of the data seemed to have a cake result. By collecting all and investigating and finding the inventory of who was doing what, a lot of people were shocked that there was so many people doing things, but they just weren't in the same circles. There was no collection, there was no knowledge, and by doing that, all of a sudden they provided a much better communicative platform, people to rent and use and understand they had a lot of power.
Well, Ontario was an agricultural community up until the Second World War. And the two things you did when you left the farm, you were either into sports or into music.
Yeah.
They're the very first two things. And all the rural organizations, whether they be women's institutes or farmers' institutes, were basically set up to reduce basically the loneliness within a community. Because you had a lot of rural communities scattered all over the place, but not a communications network as we have now. So what do you do when you're not on the farm? You do music, you do arts and crafts, or you do sports. And one of the very first non-agricultural committees in Simcoe County was SCACA, Simcoe County Arts and Crafts Society, which was formed in 1946, bringing a bunch of quilters together for the sake of doing art, doing something non-agricultural, and to reduce the loneliness of the family farm.
There's a point I'd like to raise here too, and this comes right back to your point, Greg, about development of facilities and halls, especially after the First World War. And that is, a lot of municipalities developed not only community halls, but in a lot of cases, they developed town halls that included space for a theater. Think about the number of town halls that we know about in our area that have a community theater involved.
Or a stage at one end,
Or a stage at one
kitchen
end,
at the other.
a hall with a stage at one end. In some cases, like Meaford, for example, it was called the Opera House.
Yep.
That might be a little grand, but
We
in
had
fact,
one of those that burned
they
down.
had a town hall with space for the municipal offices and the council to meet, and a theater, a performing arts center. Now municipalities are coming back to that kind of a concept where they have multiple activities going on in recreation centers, but you mentioned heritage at the beginning of our talk here. There's a rich heritage in Ontario of towns, communities, organizations having a performance space incorporated in their municipal infrastructure. It goes way back. And if we
Yes.
talk about inventorying and planning, that's one of the places where you can start. Is there a town hall? Is there a community theater space? Who performs there? How's it used? What kind of heritage structures do we have that form the fabric and the culture of our community? So having
why do
performing arts goes way back, as well as the places where music was performed.
Why do
or
people move to a
quilted.
community now? Quality of life.
Quality of life.
Quality of life.
Jobs are becoming less as important to move somewhere, and the quality of life involving the entire family is becoming more. And arts and cultural is definitely a part of that.
Penny, Kathy, Greg, we're going to have to stop right now, and we'll continue at a later date. Thank you.